My first gaming experience left me terrified of zombies, yet games are key to facing that fear. Much like any form of fiction, games are just a reflection of the real world. While films and TV let you observe events and books add a deeper level of empathy, games make you participate on a visceral level. The experience is shallower than the real thing would be, but when you have true agency, you can connect with things that happen with fewer barriers in place. It's fun to watch Spiderman soaring through the city, and in some cases, the depiction can be transcendent, but actually taking control yourself can feel exhilarating. And when it comes to fear, when you're immersed in what you're playing, it can hit deeper too. As a kid, I watched a lot of scary movies in the depths of night. I've always had a very active imagination, so these films sometimes led to nightmares or instinctive fears instilled by the things I'd seen, but they all fade into insignificance when compared to just one moment with a single game. I was about 10 years old when I got my first games console, an old PS1. The disc which was in the console when I first turned it on was Resident Evil 2, and even though it was pretty obvious from the first loading screen that it was a horror game, I was more than used to scary stuff, so I just went with it. The scene I landed in was a street filled with wrecked and burning cars, but all I really remember was the feeling of existential dread as a horde of zombies slowly ambled towards me. I panicked, struggling to even figure out what buttons to press to run away. The zombies kept on coming, inching ever closer. I switched it off and never loaded up that game again. That fear still lingers to this day. In films and TV, you're observing something happening to someone else, so even when it's easy to empathize, it's disconnected from yourself. In books, you get to see life through a stranger's eyes, but there is still some extra distance because they are the ones with the agency. In games, you have direct control of the character on the screen. Even when you do not understand the controls, the moment you make that connection, some part of you is inhabiting the character in such a unique way. They feel more like a shallow reflection of your inner self, rather than a separate person. When being chased, or trapped, or just when there's a timer running low, this level of connection lends an immediacy and depth to the situation which is near impossible to find in other media. This only deepens over time. Once you internalize the controls, you don't consciously think about the buttons you're pressing, the position of your mouse, or what the numbers you can see are supposed to mean. The interface between you and what's happening on the screen fades away. Moving around, traversing through the world, taking aim and fighting enemies, these things become just as unconscious as moving through the real world, and some small part of you truly feels embedded into the world you're engaging with. I think it's why many of us find ourselves craning our neck to try and look around a corner, or holding our breath when our character dives underwater, or ducking to avoid some kind of danger. And while games are usually a shallow mirror, sometimes the experience can reach true instinctive depth. An immersive game will include hints about what's happening around you, which are too subtle to really register on a conscious level, but which are just significant enough that a dedicated player will subconsciously take notice. In Red Dead Redemption 2, you spend a lot of time trekking through the forests, and while they're mostly safe, on rare occasions you'll encounter an angry cougar which can kill you in mere seconds. The most obvious tell to their attacks is the deep growl just before they pounce, but when it gets that close you're almost dead already. But if you play enough, your subconscious starts to notice much more subtle cues which can tell you that a cougar is nearby even 30 seconds before it actually shows up on the screen. Things like your horse getting a little nervous, or the ambient soundscape changing just a little. Eventually, without any conscious thought, you'll find yourself tense, guns drawn, scanning the undergrowth long before you get attacked. This level of immersion is what many players are looking for in the first place, and it's also why fears created through gaming can be so potent. And it's why facing fears in games can be far more daunting than in any other media. Somehow, my one experience with Resident Evil skipped straight past that slow process of building up immersion, and that moment of true terror was burned into my subconscious. Afterwards, while I would happily watch scary films about anything else, whenever zombies were involved, I would just nope straight out the door. There are so many other films to watch and games to play that it rarely even came up until my partner and I watched Hot Fuzz together. That film is just fantastic, so he suggested watching the other legendary comedy by the same team, Shaun of the Dead. Eventually, I worked up the courage, and from start to finish, I had so much fun. Instant favourite. After that went so well, I slowly started trying more. 28 Days Later, The Walking Dead, even more obscure ones like Train to Busan or The Girl with All the Gifts, and enjoyed them all a ton. But that enjoyment was still limited to passive media. I even got myself a copy of The Last of Us, but it still felt far too daunting, too immediate. Even though I couldn't shake that fear, I could recognize it's an exception. While some aspects of gaming can be so vivid, most fears become diluted or even dissolved entirely. While phobia triggers are usually just as bad, most fears are faded because the consequences are less severe. This is at its most extreme with death. Death in games is impermanent, and the worst that can happen is you lose some progress. Taking risks doesn't hit the same, though I think it's interesting how this has changed across the different eras of gaming. I played a lot of older games, still deeply rooted in expectations from the arcade era, where your character had limited lives, and if you died too much, you saw that dreaded game over screen. Completing Super Mario felt like a monumental achievement because you had to do it in one sitting, and anytime you died too much, you had to start from the beginning. Even by the time I started gaming, that idea was fading. Games like Spyro had a life system, but it did not punish you with a complete reset if you died too often. Most of modern gaming has moved away from the concept entirely, and lives are rare these days. The concept of game over is all but gone. I'd be curious to know how this has changed the way people engage with games and how it influences the sense of fear. It's another instinct drilled into me at a young age, which still influences how I play. Not a fear of death, but an aversion to loss. Do younger gamers who grew up with checkpoints and autosaves and immortality in all their games just lack those instincts? Do games, to them, lack a little spark which comes from that? Does that lessen their immersion to the point that fears like mine are less likely to be planted? Even though it's rare these days, there are some exceptions where this concept still exists, and it's often optional. Challenges like the permadeath mode built into games like Ori and the Blind Forest, or ones players create for themselves like Nuzlocke in Pokemon. Perhaps the risk of losing it all injects some extra tension which is lost without that fear. On balance, I think it's better if the player gets to choose whether they want that experience or not. On the other hand, the appeal of many games is to experience being free of real-world limitations. Take heights, for example. In reality, I have that instinctive fear which quickly turns to sickening vertigo whenever I become too aware of just how far I'd fall if I happen to take a step in the wrong direction. That just does not translate into games at all. In games, my first instinct is to climb as high as possible, to dangle off the sides of death-defying cliffs, to leap into the unknown or glide into the distance. Part of that comes from games which grant the freedom to glide, or swing, or safely land from any height. Many lean into this, and it's one of the biggest selling points. In Spiderman, Manhattan's skyline becomes the perfect playground for you to swing around to your heart's content. It just feels great. In real life, I'd never try something like base jumping, even in the most controlled of circumstances. In a game, the lack of physicality turns it into just pure fun. Unfortunately for me, zombie games exist at the opposite end of that particular spectrum. People play them because they want tension, they want a sense of danger, even if it's diluted by the lack of consequences. If I wanted to face this particular fear, I'd have to take it head on. Enter one of my most anticipated games ever, Stray. I'd always daydreamed about an exploration game where you play as a cat, so when the PS5 announcement stream showcased this gorgeous game with a stray cat exploring a gorgeous midnight city filled with robots, I was absolutely sold. Somehow, that trailer was all I saw about the game until it came out, so I went in completely blind. Nobody mentioned the zombie ticks. I played it on stream and, well, here's the moment I realized that this was perhaps not the chill exploration mystery I had been expecting. R2! No! Baby! No! Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! Sorry. I'm fine. It's fine, this is fine. Stop it! No, get off me! No, get off! Ah! No, leave me alone! Please. Oh my god. Oh my god. Jesus Christ. I'm fine. It's all good. Okay. Good thing we didn't panic. Those ticks were maybe not quite as scary to me as zombie humans are, but Stray was a fantastic experience despite my terror every time they showed up to chase me down. They did spark that same visceral and instinctive fear, but they showed me that I could get past it if I was invested enough in what was going on. Perhaps I was ready for some actual zombies. When we finally found the time to watch The Last of Us TV adaptation, all of that had been swirling around my head, and I kept thinking back on how much of a journey it really was for me to be watching the show at all. I still had a copy of the game in my library, and as we watched it, I felt more and more that it was time to face that fear. After all, this was a story with fantastic characters I already knew and loved, one which I would want to experience in a more visceral way. After experiencing Stray, surely it wouldn't be that bad an experience. So naturally, I first loaded it up when I was alone in a darkened room in the middle of the night. That was not a good idea. Instead, I tried again on stream, so I'd have my chat to keep me company while I got my bearings, and maybe laugh at my utter panic every time the zombies came at me. They are still terrifying, and the moment they appear, my sense of direction disappears, my aiming skills fly out the window, but it's something I can bear, and the more of it I face, the more it builds my confidence and chips away at my fear. Another game just like this was the reason I have this fear in the first place, but the more I play The Last of Us, the more I'm able to deal with it. And I think that's part of the magic of games. They can plant fears so deep they stay with you for decades, but they can also provide the space for you to face them when you're ready. Films and TV gave me enough distance that I could start to deal with zombies. Books were a window into the worlds where they exist, but games were the only place where I could actually face them, where I could move, fight back, even panic, then get back up and try again. Just don't ask me to do the same with spiders. Until next time.